When soldiers moved through enemy territory during World War II, one of the deadliest threats wasn't always gunfire or artillery, it was visibility. A campfire, which offered warmth, comfort and a way to cook food, could also betray an entire unit's position to enemy scouts and snipers. Sappers, the military engineers tasked with construction, demolition and fortifications, developed clever ways to keep their fires low and their smoke invisible. Today, I want to dive deep into one of the most practical anti-smoke techniques used by these sappers, how it worked, and how you can apply these lessons even in modern survival situations. Understanding the problem these soldiers faced is crucial. Smoke is a natural signal. It rises, it curls, and under the right conditions it can be seen from miles away. In wartime Europe, especially during winter or early spring when leaves were off the trees, a thin wisp of smoke could draw enemy fire or alert reconnaissance patrols. Sappers were trained to create heat and light without the telltale column of smoke, using both physics and natural materials in inventive ways. One of the key methods involved controlling both the fuel and the airflow. Sappers would begin by choosing wood that burned cleanly. Resinous softwoods like pine were avoided because they produce thick black smoke due to high sap content. Instead, they sought out dry hardwoods, beech, oak or ash, which, when seasoned properly, burned hot and slow with minimal smoke. But, wood selection alone wasn't enough. They needed to manipulate how the fire consumed the fuel. The technique started with constructing a simple but effective fire base, often dug slightly into the ground to shield it from wind. The sapper would then layer smaller twigs and kindling at the bottom with progressively larger logs on top. What made the trick unique was the inclusion of a dry, non-flammable smoke absorber. Many units actually used a combination of sand, dirt or even damp moss, which they would place strategically around and just a bit above the fire. This method slowed the release of smoke, forcing it to disperse horizontally instead of shooting straight up into the air where, it could be spotted. Sappers also used a form of improvised chimney to direct smoke through natural foliage or rocks, which filtered and dispersed it even further. This could be as simple as a hollow log or maybe a shallow trench, angled so the smoke mingled with the ambient forest mist or rose slowly along tree trunks. In practical terms, a modern prepper could replicate this by building a fire in a shallow pit and covering the edges with stones or logs, letting the smoke escape gradually and much closer to the ground. The goal, really, is to create heat and flame without a column of smoke, not to smother the fire completely. Another overlooked factor was moisture management. Soldiers learned that adding slightly damp wood or even green leaves on top of the fire could reduce visible smoke, as the moisture caused the wood to combust more slowly. However, too much moisture could extinguish the fire entirely, so precision was key. It was a delicate balance. Sappers had to understand the properties of their fuel and adjust constantly, a skill that can still benefit anyone trying to maintain a covert fire in survival situations. Applying this in a modern context doesn't require a wartime background. For instance, if you are camping in bear country or simply want to keep your campsite discreet, the Sapper method is highly effective. To begin, you want to select dense, dry wood and build a small fire in a pit. Use sand, dirt or stones around the edges to guide the smoke away. If you need to cook, it's best to maintain a low, smouldering fire under a grate, directing the heat upward without creating a large, visible plume. Even in windy conditions, a Sapper-style pit fire is just much easier to control than a traditional open flame. Sappers also had this habit of pre-planning their firewood storage. They would gather materials in a shaded, dry area to prevent moisture accumulation, and then cut the wood into smaller pieces to ensure consistent burning. For a survivalist today, this translates into scouting and preparing your fire materials in advance. Avoiding wet or resinous wood not only reduces smoke, but also makes your fire more efficient and, honestly, a lot less labour-intensive. Finally, the anti-smoke fire wasn't just about concealment, it was about survival. Sappers could cook, warm themselves and maintain morale without exposing their position to enemy forces. Today, understanding these principles can help any prepper or historian appreciate the ingenuity of World War II soldiers while providing practical strategies for modern outdoor scenarios. Whether it's stealth camping, emergency preparedness, or simply refining your outdoor cooking skills, the lessons of the Sapper fire remain valuable and, honestly, remarkably applicable. Remember, the key takeaways are careful fuel selection, strategic layering, moisture control, and smoke dispersion. Each element alone isn't enough, but combined, they form a system that's efficient, safe, and incredibly hard to detect. You're not just recreating history. You're learning techniques that kept soldiers alive under extreme conditions. If you found this dive into World War II's anti-smoke campfire trick insightful, take a moment to hit subscribe and share this with fellow history enthusiasts and survivalists. The Prepper Historian brings history to life in ways that are practical, engaging, and deeply rooted in real-life applications. Don't miss out on the next hidden survival technique from the past. It could save lives tomorrow.